Now, I know that many people, if they're watching this channel, all the 10 people who do, uh, you probably hear my voice. You probably hear the way I talk, my diction, my vocabulary, and whatever. And you might have some sort of perception about me that I'm whitewashed, I'm not truly black, or I'm someone that you don't take too seriously and who's never really seen poverty or never really seen hard times. And so I can't relate to the black experience at all. But I tell you that that's not true. I've lived in the ghetto for a year all by myself, and I had to make it work by myself. I didn't have any help. I didn't have my parents assisting me. I didn't have relatives really assisting me. I had to figure it out. And it was rough, but I learned quite a bit from that experience. You see, when I was living in that neighborhood, I saw how the black culture really molded people to who they were. Um, First off, I saw drug dealing a lot. And I didn't really see adults selling drugs, to be honest. I mainly saw young kids selling drugs. And I would ask around and say, why is it always kids selling drugs? And then, the neighbors would tell me, they're pretty much trying to make sure that they're not caught by the police because if you would drive down the street, there was three, four, five police vehicles parked trying to look for some sort of illegal activity that they can nab, right? Because the neighborhood that we lived in was a high crime neighborhood. So the police were always zeroing in on anything that would go on that would be illegal, right? And they use kids in order to make sure that they can insulate themselves from suspicion from police. And it was smart because the kids knew what they were doing. The drug addicts knew what they were doing. You wouldn't even suspect it was drug dealing, the way they would interact with each other. They were very, very clever. The whole process was very clever, and the police would always be uh, kind of bemused as to what was going on themselves. But I saw that quite a bit. I also saw tremendous amounts of trash in the neighborhood. It was dirty. It was not well kept. There was syringes all over the streets. There was trash from people's kitchens on the street, not picked up properly. There was graffiti everywhere, where there were graffiti buildings, and it wouldn't be renovated, wouldn't be fixed. Uh, there was just broken down cars that would just stay there. No one would take it. No one would fix it. Nothing. It looked like a bomb was dropped in that area and people were just living in a war zone. That's how it felt like at times, especially at night when there was a lot of activity when it came to the gangs and the drug dealing. It felt like that. It really did. But the trash and the dirtiness of the area was very, very hard to deal with, especially for me. Uh, Another thing was the gang banging. There was an awful lot of gang banging in the area. You were literally risking your life to go out at 9 o'clock at night to get something to eat or coming back from an event. You were risking your life because the gangs would drive around the area. And if they just had some sort of itch for interaction, they would try to mess with you. They really would. And it was terrifying to be out at night in that area. Very much was. But I tell you that if you are nice and kind to the wrong people, they'd make you pay. I remember I gave water to a few homeless people who were asking me for water, and I gave it to them. Kind of knew in my gut it was the wrong thing to do, but I gave it to them and they drank it. 3 hours later, they came back with two other homeless people, trying to ask for things, but they were trying to open my door of my apartment to see if they can come in. And I knew right then and there that this was potentially a robbery, right? Because there's no reason why you would want to open my door without my permission. And so I had to grab my gun in order to protect myself. And I had my gun loaded aimed it at the door. So if they came in, it was on. And luckily they didn't come in, and I calmed down and made sure that I wasn't too nervous. And for a whole month, I slept with my gun under the pillow. And I got two additional guns to make sure that if that gun jammed, I can get another gun to assist me to protect myself. You had to have a weapon in that area if you wanted to be safe of some sort. You knew the police probably weren't going to come at the right time. By the time they come, it was already over. The neighbors probably wouldn't defend you, so you literally had to defend yourself if you wanted to be safe. Overall, you had such a hopeless feeling living in that neighborhood that you would act out of character, especially for me. When I was living there, I was so depressed and I was so despondent in living there that I started drinking quite a bit. And I wasn't a drinker. I didn't drink any, but I started drinking a lot because the place was so depressing. It was so awful living there. You know, you just don't know how it's like living in the ghetto. And that's why when you listen to rap songs, it makes sense. You understand where they're coming from because you're always on edge. You're always on edge. Always, always. If I had mail that was being delivered to me by package, I had to make sure that I got back to my apartment quickly because there were always thieves driving around the neighborhood trying to nab packages that they can steal from delivery drivers. That was very, very frequent. In fact, my neighbors, we would all protect each other's packages. That if we were home and we saw that one of the neighbors wasn't home, we would make sure that we would get their package, put it in our apartment, and then give it to them to make sure that it wasn't stolen. Okay. It's just not a normal existence. I can tell you so much more than that, but it's not a normal existence. And I knew that this is a black issue because this is a black neighborhood. And when I asked around other people from their experiences, they had the same experience I had when it came to living in a black neighborhood. And so I knew it was a culture. It wasn't the white man. It wasn't the system. It was the black person and their culture molding them to be nothing but a criminal and someone who cannot live in a civilized society. And that's essentially what it is. And that is why I am so desperate to change things because we can't live in this culture. If we do, we won't have a civilization. There's no way. Crime, drugs, devastation, all the vices that you would have in a civilization are all in that culture. And I saw it up close and personal in that neighborhood for a year. And I tell you that when I left that neighborhood and I moved into a safer neighborhood, it took me 6 months to get back to normal. Where when I was walking down the street, I wasn't always looking over my shoulder because there'd be times where uh, a guy would randomly push you and call you names and fight you for no reason. For no reason. That happened quite a bit. And I had to make sure that I wasn't going to be harassed. I had to make sure that, my door was locked so then no one would break in and try to rob me. I had to make sure my car door was locked. Uh, I had to make sure that my guns were loaded. You know, I, it's a stressful way to live and you're not living, you're surviving. We have to change this. We have to change this. And that's why I make these videos is from that experience. And so black culture has to change. Truly does.